My parents spent 2 years telling every employer in my hometown that I was a thief, rendering my degree and references useless. My father believed total rejection would force me back under his roof. But he didn't know my grandmother left a plan that would activate the second I walked into the right building. He definitely didn't know the CEO he tried to poison against me was about to hand me an envelope dated 15 years ago. I am Isla Green, and for the last 630 days, I have been living inside a ghost story where I am the one haunting my own life. If you looked at my resume, you would see a summa cum laude graduate with a dual degree in business administration and finance, an internship record that was spotless, and a list of technical certifications that usually guarantees a starting salary in the six figures. On paper, I was the candidate recruiters dream about. I was young, hungry, overqualified, and desperate enough to work 80-hour weeks just to prove I belonged in the room. But paper is fragile. It tears easily. And as I learned the hard way, it burns even faster. For the past year, my life has been a repetitive, suffocating loop of false hope and crushing silence. I have been on exactly 28 interviews. I have worn my one good navy blue blazer until the elbows started to shine from wear. I have sat in climate-controlled conference rooms with glass walls, shaking hands with hiring managers who looked at me with genuine interest. I have answered their behavioral questions perfectly. I have watched their eyes light up when I walked them through my portfolio. I have heard the phrases that are supposed to mean you have made it. We love your energy. Isla, you are exactly what we are looking for. Expect an offer letter by Friday, and then Friday would come, and my phone would remain silent. Monday would roll around, and I would send the polite follow-up email, the one that reeks of anxiety but tries to sound professional. Tuesday would bring the response. It was always the same response. It was never a phone call. Always an email, usually sent from a generic no-reply address, stripped of all the warmth and promise we had shared in the room. Thank you for your interest. After further consideration, we have decided to move in a different direction. Sometimes, if I was lucky, I would get a human response. I remember one hiring manager at a logistics firm in the next county over. She had practically hired me on the spot. She had introduced me to the team. She had shown me where my desk would be. 2 days later, I received a 2-sentence rejection. When I called her, desperate for feedback, she answered by mistake. I heard her sigh, a heavy, uncomfortable sound, before she said, Isla, I can't, just check your references, okay? Just check your references. But that was the thing. I never provided references. Most of these entry-level analyst roles didn't require them until the final background check stage. I hadn't even gotten that far. So how did they know? It took me 6 months to realize that in a town like Cedar Brook, and in a county like this one, formal references are a myth. The real references are the ones made on the golf course, or over a steak dinner at the country club, or in a quick text message between men who have done business together for 30 years. My father, Calvin Green, owns the Green Ridge Structural Group. If you drive through this county, you cannot go 5 miles without seeing his name on a placard, a construction fence, or a donor wall. He built the municipal library. He built the extension to the high school. He built the shopping complex where I bought my interview suit. He didn't just build buildings, he built debts. Half the commercial landlords and business owners in this part of the state owed him a favor, or feared losing his patronage. He had poisoned the well. He hadn't just poisoned it, he had cemented it shut. I was not just unemployed, I was unemployable, and that is why, at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, instead of analyzing market trends or auditing balance sheets, I am standing behind the reception desk of the Cedar Ridge Lodge, staring at the flickering neon vacancy sign that buzzes like a dying fly. The Cedar Ridge Lodge is the kind of place people stop only because they are too tired to drive another 10 miles. The carpet in the lobby is a swirl of brown and orange that hasn't been stylish since the 1970s. The air always smells faintly of lemon industrial cleaner and stale cigarette smoke. No matter how much we scrub, I am the night auditor here. It is a fancy title for a job that is essentially guarding the front door and folding towels while the rest of the world sleeps. It pays $2 above minimum wage. It offers no benefits, no 401k, and absolutely no future. I got the job because Marla, the manager, was the only person in the county who didn't know who my father was. She had moved here from Ohio 3 weeks before I applied. She looked at my resume, looked at my desperate eyes, and didn't ask why a finance graduate was applying to scrub toilets and check in truckers at midnight. She just handed me a polo shirt that was 2 sizes too big and told me not to steal the soaps. Steal, that word makes my stomach turn over. Acid rising in my throat. That is the label my parents pinned on me. Thief. It is a simple word. 1 syllable. Sharp, ugly. It is easy to say and impossible to wash off. It doesn't matter that it is a lie. It doesn't matter that I have never stolen a thing in my life. It doesn't matter that the theft they accuse me of was actually me using a credit card they gave me for expenses they approved, to buy books for classes they insisted I take. In the court of public opinion, the accusation is the verdict. The psychological toll of living this way is something I am still trying to calculate. The worst part isn't the poverty, though eating instant noodles 5 nights a week is humbling. The worst part is the gaslighting. When you are told the same lie enough times, by the people who are supposed to love you, and then that lie is validated by the rejection of the entire world, you start to fracture. There are nights, sitting here in the quiet of the lobby, where I catch myself replaying memories, twisting them until they fit my father's narrative. Did I misunderstand? I wonder. Staring at the ledger on the counter, maybe I did spend too much. Maybe I was greedy. Maybe I am difficult. Maybe I am the problem. It is an insidious poison. It makes you doubt your own reality. I find myself triple-checking the cash drawer at the start and end of my shift, terrified that $1 might be missing. If a guest says they didn't get enough towels, my heart hammers against my ribs. Convinced I will be accused of hoarding them, I walk through the world with my head down, shoulders hunched, trying to make myself smaller, trying to occupy less space so that maybe, just maybe, I won't be noticed, because being noticed means being destroyed. My father thinks this is a lesson. That is what he told me the day I left. He stood in the doorway of the house that felt more like a museum than a home, and he looked at me with that cold, terrifying calmness. "You will learn what the real world is like, Ela," he said. "And when you are hungry enough, you will come back and apologize." He thinks rejection will force me back under his roof. He thinks that by stripping away my career, my reputation, and my dignity, he can starve me into submission. He wants me to crawl back, broken, so he can rebuild me as the silent, obedient daughter he always wanted, the spare, the one who exists to make her brother look better. He doesn't know about the envelope. He doesn't know that my grandmother, Evelyn Hart, saw this coming years ago. Grandma Evelyn was the only person in my family who looked at my father and didn't see a king. She saw a bully. She was a woman of few words but massive action. She died 4 years ago, and I thought she had left me nothing. My father had told me there was no will, no inheritance for me, that Grandma had left everything to the responsible members of the family. But lately, strange cracks have been appearing in the wall my father built around me. First, there was the voicemail from an estate attorney in the city, a man named Mr. Sterling. I had missed the call 3 months ago because I was working a double shift, and by the time I listened to it, I was too exhausted and too depressed to call back. He had mentioned documents regarding the Hart estate and time-sensitive materials. I had assumed it was a mistake, or worse, a cruel prank. I let it slide. Then, there was the email. It arrived 2 days ago, landing in my personal inbox like a meteor. It was a request for an interview from Holloway Meridian Partners. I stared at the screen for an hour. Holloway Meridian is not just a company. It is an institution. It is one of the most prestigious boutique investment firms in the state, arguably the country. People kill to get internships there. Ivy League graduates paper their HR department with resumes and never get a response. And yet, here was an email, addressed to me. inviting me to an in-person interview at their headquarters in the city. It made no sense. My resume, currently tarnished by a year-long gap and a stint at a roadside motel, should not have even made it past their automated filters. And the strangest part? The email didn't come from a recruiter. It came from the office of the CEO. Graham Holloway. Dear Ms. Green, Mr. Holloway requests your presence for a discussion regarding your potential future with our firm. Please arrive at 10 in the morning on Friday. It has to be a trap, or a glitch. Or maybe my father is expanding his game, setting me up for a humiliation on a grander stage. Maybe he knows Graham Holloway. Maybe they golf together. Maybe I will walk into that office and find my father sitting there, swirling a glass of scotch, waiting to tell me that I am nothing without him. But there is a tiny, dangerous spark in my chest that wonders, what if it's not? Grandma Evelyn used to tell me, Isla, people who want to own you always start by controlling your options, but they always forget that you can build your own door. She told me that when I was 12, after my father forbade me from joining the debate team because it was too argumentative for a young lady. I didn't understand what she meant then. I thought she was just being eccentric, but I remember the way she looked at me right before she died. She gripped my hand with a strength that surprised me and whispered, I kept the receipts, Isla, every single one. I thought she meant grocery receipts. Now, standing in the dim light of the hotel lobby, listening to the hum of the vending machine, I am starting to wonder if she meant something else entirely. Legal receipts, moral receipts, the kind of receipts that prove who paid for what and who owes whom. My father thought he owned my story because he controlled the narrator. He controlled the town, the employers, the reputation. He thought that if he shouted thief loud enough, it would become the truth. He didn't account for the fact that the truth is patient. A vibration on the counter snaps me out of my thoughts. My phone lights up. The screen cuts through the darkness of the lobby. I look down, and my breath catches in my throat. Dad. The name hangs there, glowing white against the black background. It is 2 in the morning. He never calls at this hour. He never calls at all. Really. He usually sends my mother to do his bidding, or Trent to mock me. I stare at the phone as if it is a bomb. My hand hovers over it, the instinct to answer, the ingrained training of a lifetime of obedience, screams at me to pick up, apologize, beg. I pull my hand back. I let it ring. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. The silence of the lobby returns, heavier than before. A moment later, the notification pops up. New voicemail. My fingers tremble as I press play. I lift the phone to my ear, pressing it hard against my skin, bracing myself for the shouting, for the anger. But his voice is low, calm, terrifyingly reasonable. Isla, he says. The sound of his voice makes the hair on my arms stand up. I know you are tired. I know you are working at that place. It is embarrassing for the family. We have had enough of this tantrum. This is your last chance. Come home tomorrow. We can make all of this go away. Don't make me take the next step. The line clicks dead. The next step, I lower the phone. The threat hangs in the air, invisible and suffocating. I don't know what the next step is, but I know my father. If he is calling me personally, it means he is losing patience. It means he is done waiting for me to break on my own. He is coming to break me himself. But as I look out the glass doors at the empty parking lot, where the rain is starting to fall in sheets under the streetlights, I feel something other than fear. I feel the weight of the envelope I haven't received yet. I feel the curiosity about the interview I haven't attended yet. I feel the ghost of my grandmother standing beside me, whispering that she already placed a door in the wall he built. I am not going home. I am going to the interview, and if my father wants a war, he is about to realize that he has been fighting an unarmed opponent for 2 years, but that is about to change. To understand why I am currently standing in a cheap motel lobby with a stolen future, you have to understand the world that built me. You have to understand Cedar Brook. In Cedar Brook, the truth was not what happened. The truth was what the neighbors believed happened. It was a town where reputation was the only currency that mattered, and gossip was the legal system we all lived under. If you drove down Main Street, you would see manicured lawns that looked like they had been cut with nail scissors, and white picket fences that were painted fresh every single spring. It looked like the American dream, but for me, it was a surveillance state. And at the center of that state sat my father, Calvin Green. My father did not just live in our town. He owned it, or at least, he owned the skeleton of it. He was the founder and CEO of the Green Ridge Structural Group. You could not drive 2 miles on the highway without seeing one of his massive yellow trucks rumbling past. The Green Ridge logo stamped on the side in aggressive, blocky font. He poured the concrete for the foundations of the new mall. He erected the steel beams for the county hospital. He liked to say that he held the town up, and he meant it literally. He was a man who took up all the oxygen in a room. He was broad-shouldered, loud, and possessed a terrifying kind of charisma that made people want to please him just to avoid his judgment. He didn't have conversations. He held court. At home, his mood was the weather forecast. If Calvin came home happy, the house was warm. If he came home angry over a delayed shipment or an incompetent subcontractor, the house froze over. Then there was my mother, Elaine. If my father was the iron fist, my mother was the velvet glove that made sure the bruises didn't show. She was the picture of polished perfection. I don't think I ever saw her with a hair out of place or without a tasteful string of pearls around her neck. She sat on every charity committee that mattered. She organized the church bake sales, ensuring her lemon bars were always the first to sell out. She smiled with a brightness that didn't reach her eyes, a practiced expression she wore like armor. But inside our house, she was a ghost. She moved silently across the expensive hardwood floors, anticipating my father's needs before he even voiced them. Her entire existence was dedicated to maintaining the facade that we were the perfect family. She traded her voice for security. If my father made a cruel joke at dinner, she laughed. If he criticized her cooking, she apologized and promised to do better next time. She taught me, through silent example, that a woman's job was to absorb the impact, never to deflect it. And then there was Trent. My brother was 2 years older than me, and from the moment he took his first breath, he was the heir. It was not subtle. In the Green household, Trent was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets hoping to stay in orbit. Trent was not bad. Exactly. He was just aggressively mediocre. He got average grades. He was an okay athlete, but never the star. He had a charm that was slightly too loud, and a laugh that was slightly too arrogant. But to my father, Trent was a prodigy. I remember when Trent failed a math test in the 10th grade. I was sitting at the kitchen island, finishing my own homework, when he threw the paper on the counter. A big red F was scrawled at the top. When my father came home, I braced myself for the explosion. I expected him to yell at Trent. I expected a lecture on responsibility. Instead, my father picked up the paper, frowned, and said, "That teacher has never liked our family. He is jealous. Trent, that is all it is. I will make a call to the principal in the morning and get this sorted out." And he did. The grade was changed to a passing C, and the teacher was transferred to a different district the following year. Trent learned early on that consequences were for other people. He learned that he could break things, windows, promises, people, and my father would write a check or make a phone call to fix it. He walked through life with the unearned confidence of a man who has never hit a wall he couldn't buy his way through. Then there was me, Isla. If Trent was the heir, I was the spare. I was the insurance policy in case something went wrong. But mostly, I was background noise. I realized my place in the hierarchy when I was 7 years old. I had come home with a report card of straight A's and a drawing I had won a blue ribbon for at the art fair. I waited for dinner, bursting with pride, ready to show my father. We sat down at the long mahogany table. This was the ritual. 6 o'clock sharp, no television, no phones, just family time, which really meant an audience for my father's daily monologue. "The contract for the stadium is stalling," my father said, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. The city council is full of idiots. I had to threaten to pull our sponsorship of the summer festival just to get them to approve the zoning permits. My mother nodded sympathetically. That is terrible. Calvin, you do so much for this town. Trent, my father said, pivoting without acknowledging her. How was practice? It was good, Trent said, chewing with his mouth open. Coach says I might start on Friday if Johnson's ankle doesn't heal. Good, my father beamed. You tell Coach that if the team needs new jerseys next season, he knows who to call. We need you on that field, son. I saw my opening. I cleared my throat. Daddy, I got a blue ribbon today. My father stopped chewing. He looked at me, not with pride, but with mild irritation, as if a buzzing fly had interrupted him. Isla, he said, his voice dropping an octave. We are talking about your brother's future. Do not interrupt men when they are discussing business. But it's art, I whispered. Art is a hobby, he said, turning back to his steak. Football builds character. Now, pass the salt. I passed the salt, and I learned the rule. My ambition was selfishness. My questions were disrespect. My achievements were invisible unless they somehow served the Green Ridge narrative. If I wanted to survive in that house, I had to be smaller. I had to be quieter. I had to exist only to pass the plates and keep the peace. But there was one person who didn't follow the script. My grandmother, Evelyn Hart. She was my mother's mother, but she was nothing like her daughter. Grandma Evelyn was made of steel and skepticism. She had started her own bakery business in the 1970s, when women in Cedar Brook were expected to stay in the kitchen for free. Not for profit, she had built it up, franchised it, and sold it for a fortune in the 90s. She was wealthy in her own right, which meant she was the only person my father couldn't bully. She visited us every Sunday for dinner. Those were the only times I saw my father sweat. Grandma Evelyn didn't drive a flashy car. She drove a sensible sedan that was 10 years old. She didn't wear designer clothes. She wore tailored wool suits that looked like they could survive a war. She had sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. One Sunday, when I was 16, the tension at the table was thick enough to choke on. Trent had been caught drinking behind the bleachers at school. Instead of punishment, my father was currently explaining how he was going to threaten the school board with a lawsuit if they suspended him. It is a rite of passage, my father declared, pouring himself a second glass of wine. Boys will be boys. We can't let a little mistake ruin his transcript. My mother was staring at her plate, silently cutting a potato into tiny geometric cubes. It is not a mistake. Calvin, Grandma Evelyn said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. It is a pattern. My father's face turned a shade of purple I knew well. I am handling my son. Evelyn, I don't need advice from you on how to raise men. You aren't raising a man, she said, taking a sip of water. You are raising a liability, and when the world finally tells him no, he isn't going to know how to handle it because you have spent his entire life removing the word from his vocabulary. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother looked like she might faint. Trent smirked, knowing he was untouchable. Later that evening, I was sitting on the back porch, hiding from the aftermath. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the manicured lawn. The sliding door opened, and Grandma Evelyn stepped out. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat down on the swing next to me and lit a cigarette, a habit she refused to quit because, as she said, she had earned the right to one vice. You're quiet tonight, Isla, she said. I'm always quiet, I replied, pulling my knees to my chest. She turned to look at me, the smoke curled around her silver hair. You're quiet because you're observing. That's good. But don't let the silence become your personality. Your mother did that. Look what it cost her. I looked through the glass doors at my mother, who was cleaning the kitchen, frantically scrubbing a counter that was already clean. I don't have a choice, Grandma, I said bitterly. Dad decides everything. He decides where we go, what we do, who we are. He wants me to go to the state college so I can live at home and save money. He says there's no point in me going anywhere else. Grandma Evelyn tapped ash into a ceramic bowl. Your father is a builder, Isla. He understands structures. He understands that if you want a building to stand, you have to control the foundation. He wants to keep you here because he knows you're the smart one. Trent is his vanity project, but you're the one who actually understands how things work. That scares him, I scoffed. He thinks I'm useless. No, she corrected me. He thinks you are useful property. There is a difference. She reached out and took my chin in her hand, forcing me to look at her. Her skin was cool and papery, but her grip was iron. Listen to me, Isla. People who want to own you always start by controlling your options. They cut off your money. They cut off your confidence. They tell you that the world is scary and that only they can protect you. They make you think that leaving is impossible. It feels impossible, I whispered. That is the design, she said. But designs can be broken. She let go of my chin and reached into her purse, pulling out a small, leather-bound notebook. She didn't give it to me. She just showed it to me. I learned a long time ago that freedom isn't about being loud. It's about being prepared, she said. Your father thinks he holds all the keys to this family. He thinks that because he pays the bills. He owns the people living under the roof. She put the notebook back into her purse and snapped it shut. The sound was final. When the day comes that you feel cornered, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, and that day will come, Isla, when you feel like the walls are closing in and he has taken away every single ladder you tried to climb, don't panic. She looked back at the house, where my father was now shouting at the television, oblivious to the two women plotting on his porch. Don't panic, she repeated. Just remember, I already placed a door. You just have to be brave enough to walk through it when the time is right. What door? I asked. What do you mean? She just smiled. A small, secret smile that didn't reach the rest of her face. You focus on your grades. You focus on keeping your head down. Let me worry about the architecture. That was the last real conversation I had with her before the stroke took her speech, and then her life. 2 years later, I didn't know what she meant then. I thought she meant a savings account, or maybe some advice she had written down. I went back to being the spare. I went back to passing the salt and watching Trent get praised for breathing. But I never forgot the way she looked at my father that night. It wasn't with fear. It was with the calm calculation of a woman who had already planted the dynamite and was just waiting for the fuse to burn down. I lived in that house for 18 years. Suffocating under the weight of gratitude, I was expected to feel for a life I didn't choose. I watched my mother fade until she was transparent. I watched Trent bloat with entitlement, and I watched my father build his empire of favors and debts, thinking he was untouchable. He didn't know that the quiet teenage girl passing him the potatoes was memorizing the blueprints of his behavior, and he certainly didn't know that the old woman smoking on the porch had already drawn up a renovation plan that would bring the whole house down. The lie that would eventually destroy my career did not start in a boardroom or a police station. It started in my father's study on a humid Tuesday afternoon in August, 3 weeks before I was set to leave for university. My father, Calvin, sat behind his desk, a massive slab of dark oak that looked less like furniture and more like a barricade. He held up a credit card. It was a platinum business card, heavy and cool to the touch, with his name embossed on the front. He extended it toward me, but he didn't let go immediately when I reached for it. He held onto the edge, creating a moment of tension, a physical reminder of who held the power. "This is for necessities, Isla," he said, his voice dripping with a generosity that I, naively, believed was real. "You are going to a good school. You will be surrounded by people from serious families. I do not want you looking like a beggar. Buy your books. Buy the equipment you need. Represent the green name properly." I took the card. I felt a surge of gratitude so sharp it almost hurt. For 18 years, I had fought for scraps of his approval, and here it was, tangible and plastic. I thought, finally, he was seeing me as an investment, not a liability. "Thank you, Daddy," I said. "I promise I will be careful." "See that you are," he replied, already turning back to his computer. "I will see the statement." I took that instruction as a sacred vow. When I arrived on campus, I did not go on a shopping spree. I did not buy clothes. I did not buy alcohol or concert tickets. I treated that credit card like a loaded weapon that could go off if I mishandled it. I spent 3 days scouring the internet for used textbooks, finding copies with highlighted pages and bent spines because they were 40% cheaper than the new ones in the campus bookstore. I needed a laptop because my high school one had died, so I bought a factory refurbished model from 2 years ago, bulky, ugly, but functional. I paid the mandatory lab fees for my science electives. I bought the specific accounting software required for my major. I kept a spreadsheet. Every night, I logged the expense, the justification, and the exact amount to the penny. I stapled the receipts to a piece of paper. I was proud of my frugality. I had spent $2,400.15 on items that were strictly essential for my education. I thought I had done well. I thought I had shown responsibility. The bill arrived in October. I was home for a weekend visit, a requirement my father had insisted on. We were in the living room, my mother, Trent, and me. The television was on low volume. The atmosphere was deceptively calm. Then my father walked in. He held a piece of paper in his hand, waving it like a flag of war. "Isla," he said. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Explain this." He threw the credit card statement onto the coffee table. It slid across the glass surface and stopped in front of me. I don't understand," I stammered, picking it up. "It's the supplies. For school." $2,000? He said, his voice rising now, performing for the audience of my mother and brother. "You think money is water? You think because I work hard, you can just dip your hand into my pocket and take what you want?" "It's for books," I said, my voice shaking. "And the laptop. You said necessities." "I said necessities," he roared. "A library card is free. Used books are $5. You bought a computer? Did you ask me? Did you get a purchase order approved?" "You didn't say I needed a purchase order," I argued, trying to summon logic against his rage. "You said represent the family. I can't do my finance homework on a piece of paper. Dad, I saved money. I bought the refurbished one. Do not lie to me." That was the moment. The shift. He pointed a finger at me, his face red, his eyes bulging with a manufactured indignation. "You took advantage. You saw a line of credit and you got greedy. That is stealing. Isla, you used my money for things you wanted, not things you needed. You are a thief." The word hung in the air. Thief. My mother looked down at her knitting, her needles clicking a little faster. Trent let out a short, sharp laugh, as if he were watching a sitcom. "I am not a thief," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "I can show you the receipts. I can show you the syllabus where it says these things are required." "I don't care about your syllabus," Calvin shouted. "I care about character, and you have shown yours. You have shown that you cannot be trusted with resources." He snatched the statement back from me. "You will pay this back," he declared. "Every cent, plus interest. I am treating this as a loan you took without permission, and until it is paid, you get nothing, no allowance, no gas money, nothing. You want to act like an adult? You can pay your own way." "But I can't work full-time and take 18 credits," I pleaded. "I'll lose my scholarship if my grades drop." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to steal from your father," he said coldly. "Pay it back, or you will learn what it means to be truly on your own." He walked out of the room. My mother waited until his footsteps faded down the hall before she looked up. Her eyes were sad, but her voice was resigned. "Oh, honey," she whispered, "why do you have to provoke him? He's just trying to teach you responsibility. He wants you to understand the value of $1. He's lying." "Mom," I said, my voice breaking. "He knows those were school supplies." He just has a different definition of necessity, she said, smoothing her skirt. Just do what he says, apologize, work it off. It's better than the fighting. She never defended me, not once. She reclassified his abuse as education, making herself feel better about letting it happen. So, I worked, for the next 2 years. My college experience was a blur of caffeine and exhaustion. While my peers were joining sororities or taking unpaid internships at prestigious firms, the kind of internships that lead to the jobs I can't get now, I was waking up at 4 in the morning to open the campus coffee shop. I poured lattes for 4 hours, went to class until 2, and then worked the evening shift at the university library until midnight. I was perpetually tired. My eyes had permanent dark circles. I missed networking mixers because I had to pick up an extra shift to make the monthly payment my father demanded. I missed the study groups where the real connections were made. I got the grades, but I lost the social capital, and every time I came home. The label was there, waiting for me. It became the family joke, the lore. At Thanksgiving, Trent would make a show of moving his wallet from the table to his pocket when I sat down. "Better be safe," he would smirk, looking at my father for approval. "Don't leave Ela near a register. She has sticky fingers." "Trent, behave," my mother would say, but she would smile. She would smile because the tension was diffused, even if it was at my expense. "It is good to keep her humble," my father would add, carving the turkey. She learned a hard lesson. Maybe one day she will thank me. I sat there, chewing dry turkey, swallowing the humiliation along with the food. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the table over, but I knew that any reaction would just prove his point. "See? She is unstable. She is difficult." The only person who didn't laugh was Grandma Evelyn. She was still alive then, though failing. She would sit at the end of the table, her hands trembling slightly, watching the dynamic with eyes that were losing their sight but none of their sharpness. One afternoon, during my sophomore year, I was at her house helping her sort through old photographs. I was complaining about the second job, about how unfair it was that I was paying for a laptop I used for school, while Trent had just been gifted a brand new sports car for effort. "He calls me a thief, Grandma," I said, bitterly sorting a stack of black and white photos. "He tells everyone. He told the neighbors I stole from him. It's a lie." Grandma Evelyn reached out and stopped my hand. "Isla," she said. Her voice was raspy. "Stop trying to convince them. You cannot use logic against a man who is using emotion as a weapon." "So I just take it?" "No," she said. "You document it." She pointed to the desk in the corner of her room. "Bring me that binder." I brought it to her. It was empty. "From now on," she said, "you save everything, every receipt, every email, every bank statement, every text message where he mentions this debt when you pay him. You write a check, and you write, 'Repayment for authorized school expenses' in the memo line. You make a paper trail that is so thick it could choke him." "Why?" I asked. "He doesn't care about paper." "He doesn't," she agreed. "But the world does. And one day, Ela, you are going to leave this town. And when you do, he will try to rewrite history. He will try to tell the world that you are crazy, or ungrateful, or a criminal. That is what men like him do when they lose control." She tapped the binder with a bony finger. "This is not for him. This is for you. This is your shield. You fill this binder, and you hide it. Do not let him see it. Do not let your mother see it. You keep it safe." I looked at the empty binder. It felt like a small, silly defense against a man who owned the town. But I promised her I would do it. I started that day. I dug the original credit card statement out of my files. I found the receipt for the laptop. I printed out the syllabus. I kept the carbon copies of every check I wrote him. I saved the nasty emails he sent when I was a day late with a payment. I built a library of evidence, page by boring page. Grandma Evelyn watched me do it. About a month before the stroke that took her voice, she called me to her bedside. She looked frail, her skin like parchment paper. "Isla," she whispered, "I want you to know something." "What is it?" Grandma? I fixed it, she said. Her eyes drifted to the window. I hate that you are going through this, but I couldn't give you the money directly. He would have taken it. He would have punished you for it. I know, I said gently. So I did something else, she said, a faint, mischievous smile touching her lips. I created something that doesn't require his permission, and it doesn't require yours, not yet. What did you do? She closed her eyes. You focus on your receipts. My girl, let me worry about the timing. Just know that when he thinks he has closed the last window, he is going to find out that I broke the glass a long time ago. She refused to explain any further, and now, sitting in the wreckage of my life, labeled a thief by the man who was supposed to protect me. I hold on to those words like a lifeline. I have the receipts, I have the binder, but I still don't know what glass she broke, or if it will be enough to save me from the cage my father has built. The day I graduated from university should have been the loudest moment of my life. I walked across the stage with a gold cord draped over my shoulders, signaling summa cum laude honors. I had a grade point average of 3.9. I had a clean disciplinary record. I had glowing letters of recommendation from my professors, who described me as diligent, ethical, and exceptionally bright. As I held that leather-bound diploma case in my hand, I felt a weight lift off my chest that I hadn't realized I was carrying. I thought this piece of paper was a shield. I thought the ink on my transcript was powerful enough to overwrite the story my father had been telling about me for 2 years. I believed that in the professional world. Facts mattered more than family gossip. I looked out into the crowd of cheering parents and saw my family. They were clapping, but it was the polite, restrained applause one gives to a stranger. My father, Calvin, looked bored. My mother, Elaine, looked anxious, scanning the crowd as if checking to see who was watching them. Trent was checking his watch. It didn't matter. I had the degree. I had the ticket out. The reality check arrived less than 24 hours later. We were back in Cedar Brook, in the formal living room that was reserved for guests and interrogations. My father was sitting in his leather armchair, the one no one else was allowed to touch. He motioned for me to sit on the sofa opposite him. My mother sat nearby, perched on the edge of her seat like a bird ready to fly away at the first sign of trouble. So, Calvin began, lacing his fingers together. You have the degree. That is a good first step, but we both know that paper means nothing without character to back it up. I stiffened. I have character. Dad, I worked 2 jobs. I paid you back every cent for the school supplies. I graduated with honors. You paid back the money you took, he corrected, his voice smooth and dangerous. That does not erase the fact that you took it. Trust is like a mirror. Isla, once it is broken, you can glue it back together, but you can still see the cracks. I took a deep breath. I knew where this was going. He was going to offer me a low-level position at Greenridge, probably filing papers or answering phones, just to keep me under his thumb. I have a proposition, he said. I am willing to give you a chance to repair your reputation. You can come work at Greenridge. I appreciate the offer, I started to say, preparing my polite refusal. Let me finish, he cut in. You will start as an apprentice in the procurement department. It is an unpaid position for the first 6 months. You will live here, at home. You will follow the house rules, which means a 10 o'clock curfew and mandatory attendance at Sunday dinners. If, after 6 months, you have proven that you can handle resources without misplacing them, we will discuss a salary. I stared at him. The room went dead silent. It wasn't a job offer. It was a sentence. He wanted me to work for free, live in my childhood bedroom, and submit to a curfew like a teenager, all while he dangled the possibility of a paycheck like a carrot on a stick. It was a masterclass in control. He wanted to strip me of my independence the moment I had finally grasped it. Dad, I said, keeping my voice steady, I have a degree in finance. I have offers pending. I can't work for free. I need to start building my career. Offers? He raised an eyebrow. You think strangers will hire you? You think they won't ask who you are? I think my resume speaks for itself, I said. I appreciate the offer. really, but I want to get some outside experience first. I think it would be better for me to bring value back to the family later. Once I have learned how other firms operate." It was a diplomatic answer. It was the right answer. But in the Green household, the right answer was whatever Calvin wanted to hear. His face didn't change color. He didn't yell. He just went very, very still. It was the stillness of a predator that has decided to stop playing with its food. "Fine," he said. He stood up and walked over to the liquor cabinet, pouring himself a drink with slow, deliberate movements. "Do it your way. Isla, go out there. Show them your resume. See how far that piece of paper gets you without the Green name backing it up." "Is that a threat?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. He turned and smiled. It was a cold, flat smile. "It is reality. You want to be independent? Go ahead, but don't come crying to me when the world turns out to be colder than you think." I left the room feeling a mix of nausea and triumph. I thought I had won. I thought I had stood up to him and survived. I started applying the next morning. For the first 2 weeks, it seemed like I was right. My inbox pinged with interview requests. I had a strong profile. I was articulate. I was local. I drove to office parks in Cedar Brook, in the neighboring county, even up to the state capital. The first interviews were always excellent. I would sit across from hiring managers. Answering their questions about risk assessment and financial modeling, I could see them mentally checking off boxes. I could see them picturing me in the role. "You are very impressive, Isla," a hiring manager at a regional bank told me. "Honestly, you are overqualified for the junior analyst role, but we would love to have someone with your drive. I just need to run a quick background check and verify your history. Standard procedure." "Of course," I said, smiling. "I look forward to hearing from you." I would drive home, blasting music, fantasizing about the apartment I would rent. I calculated my starting salary. I planned my escape. Then, 3 days later, the email would come. "Thank you for your time. Unfortunately, we have decided not to proceed with your candidacy. It happened once. I thought it was bad luck. It happened twice. I thought it was competition. By the 5th time, I knew something was wrong. The pattern was identical. Great first interview, warm handshake, a promise of next steps, and then a sudden, icy wall of silence. I started to panic. I rewrote my resume. I removed the summa cum laude, thinking maybe I looked too expensive. I put it back on, thinking maybe I looked too lazy. I paid $300 to a professional career coach who reviewed my interview answers. "You are perfect," she told me, puzzled. "Your answers are textbook. You are charming. I don't understand why you aren't getting offers." I started doubting my own memory. Did I have spinach in my teeth? Did I say something offensive without realizing it? Was there a typo in my email address? The psychological gaslighting was working. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was simply unhireable. I wondered if I carried a scent of failure that only employers could smell. It broke 6 weeks after graduation. I had interviewed at a mid-sized logistics company about 40 minutes from Cedar Brook. The hiring manager was a man named Mr. Lewis. He was kind, grandfatherly, with pictures of his golden retrievers on his desk. We had connected instantly. We talked for an hour, well past the scheduled 30 minutes. At the end, he had shaken my hand and said, "Isla, I think you are going to fit in just fine here. I'm going to fast-track this." I waited by the phone for 2 days. On the 3rd day, my phone rang. It was Mr. Lewis. "Isla," he said. His voice was different. It was tight, uncomfortable. "Mr. Lewis," I said, my stomach dropping. "Is everything okay?" I wanted to call you personally," he said. "I can't put this in an email, and frankly, I shouldn't be telling you this at all." "Telling me what?" "We can't move forward with your application." "Why?" I asked, the desperation leaking into my voice. "You said I was a good fit. Was it my test scores?" "No," he said. He paused for a long time. I could hear him breathing on the other end. "Isla, we did a standard reference check. We called your previous employers. I only worked at the campus coffee shop and the library, I said. My managers there loved me. We didn't call the library. Mister, Lewis said softly. In this county, when we see the name Green, we call Greenridge, just as a courtesy, to see if there is a family conflict. My blood ran cold. And I spoke to your father. Mr. Lewis said, he told me, look, he strongly advised against hiring you. He said there were incidents involving financial dishonesty. He said he couldn't in good conscience let a friend hire someone with a history of theft. The world tilted on its axis. He said what? He said you are a thief. Isla. Mr. Lewis said, his voice full of pity. He said you stole from the family. He said you are brilliant but compromised. I am sorry. I can't hire someone with that kind of flag on their file, not in finance. It's a lie, I whispered. Mr. Lewis, please, it's a lie. He's angry at me because I didn't want to work for him. I believe you might be telling the truth, Mr. Lewis said, but he is Calvin Green, and I can't risk my relationship with his firm over an entry-level hire. I am sorry, kid. You need to talk to your father. The line went dead. I sat in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes. I felt like I had been punched in the throat. It wasn't just rejection. It was sabotage. It was a targeted, precision airstrike on my future. I got out of the car. I walked into the house. Calvin was in the living room, reading a trade magazine. Elaine was arranging flowers in a vase, her back to me. You called them, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was shaking with a rage I had never felt before. Calvin didn't look up from his magazine. You will have to be more specific. Isla, I make a lot of calls. Mr. Lewis, I said. The logistics company, the bank, the insurance firm, you called all of them. He turned a page. They called me, or I heard through the grapevine that my daughter was applying. It is a small community. Isla, people talk. You told them I was a thief, I screamed. You told them I stole from you. Elaine dropped a flower stem. She froze, her shoulders hunched, but she didn't turn around. Calvin finally looked up. His expression was terrifyingly calm. There was no guilt. There was only the self-righteousness of a man who believes he is God. I told them the truth, he said. You stole money from this family. You have never taken responsibility for it. If I let these people, my friends, my business partners, hire you without a warning, and you did it again, that would be on me. My reputation is on the line. You are destroying my life, I yelled. I paid you back. It was for books. You are ruining my career because I wouldn't take your slave labor apprenticeship. I am protecting this community, he said. Standing up, he loomed over me. And I am teaching you a lesson that you obviously missed in that expensive university of yours. I looked at my mother. Mom, say something. You know he's lying. You know I paid him back. Mom. Elaine turned slowly. Her face was pale. She looked at me, and I saw the tears in her eyes. I saw the knowledge that what he was doing was evil. But then I saw her eyes dart to Calvin, and I saw the fear. She looked down at her flowers. Her hands were shaking so hard the vase rattled. Isla, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Please, don't shout. She said nothing else. She chose her safety over my truth. That silence cut deeper than any word my father could have spoken. It was the final betrayal. Calvin stepped closer to me. He lowered his voice, making it intimate, making it sound like a secret between us. You thought you could walk away, he said. You thought a piece of paper made you better than us, but you are finding out that paper burns. Why are you doing this? I asked, tears streaming down my face. Because you need to learn, he said. Respect is not given, Isla. Respect is taught by consequences. And until you learn to respect the hand that feeds you, you will find that no other hand is willing to help you. He walked past me, patting my shoulder as if consoling a child. The offer for the apprenticeship still stands, he said over his shoulder, But the term is now 12 months unpaid. Think about it. I stood in the center of the living room. Listening to the clock tick, I realized then that I wasn't fighting a parent. I was fighting an architect who had designed a prison specifically for me, and the walls were closing in. If you have never lived in a small town, you might not understand how quickly the air can change. It does not happen with a bang or a public announcement. It happens in degrees, like the temperature dropping before a storm. In Cedar Brook, the shift was almost atmospheric. After the confrontation with my father and the subsequent collapse of my job prospects, the town itself seemed to turn its back on me. It started with the subtle things. When I walked into the grocery store, Mrs. Gable, a woman who had taught me Sunday school for 6 years, suddenly found the nutritional label on a can of soup fascinating. She stared at it with intense concentration until I passed her in the aisle, refusing to look up. Then it moved to the church. My mother had dragged me to the service, insisting that appearance was everything. "We hold our heads high," she had whispered in the car, her hands gripping the steering wheel. But when we entered the sanctuary, the smiles that greeted us were tight, strained things. They were smiles that didn't reach the eyes. The casual chatter that usually filled the vestibule died down the moment I stepped through the double doors. It was as if I had brought a cold draft in with me. I could feel the whispers tracking me like a spotlight. "There she is. Did you hear? Calvin said she stole thousands. Such a shame. She seemed so bright." I realized then that my father hadn't just made phone calls to employers. That would have been too surgical, too limited. He had seeded the story everywhere. He had dropped poison into the ears of his business buddies on the golf course. He had sighed theatrically at the Rotary Club meetings, playing the part of the heartbroken father dealing with a troubled daughter. He had let the story filter down through the community boards and the donor committees, until every person who mattered in Cedar Brook knew that Isla Green was damaged goods. He had constructed a quarantine zone around me, and I was the only patient inside. The humiliation wasn't just silent, though. Sometimes it was loud. 2 weeks after my last interview, I went to the Daily Grind, a coffee shop on Main Street where I used to study during high school. I just wanted to get out of the house. I wanted to sit somewhere that didn't smell like my mother's potpourri and my father's judgment. I ordered a black coffee because it was the cheapest thing on the menu, and I counted out the $2.50 in quarters from my pocket. I was waiting at the counter when the door chimed. I felt the energy in the room shift before I even turned around. It was Trent. He was with 3 of his friends, guys he had played football with, guys who were now working for their own fathers, driving leased trucks and wearing expensive watches. They were laughing, taking up space, loud and confident. Trent saw me. He stopped mid-laugh. A cruel, delighted grin spread across his face. He didn't ignore me. That would have been a mercy. Instead, he walked right up to the counter, flanking me. "Well, look who it is," Trent announced, his voice booming in the small shop. The barista, a girl I had tutored in math 3 years ago, looked down at the register, terrified. "Isla, big spender. What are you buying? The whole shop?" "Just coffee, Trent," I said, keeping my eyes fixed on the cup the barista was sliding toward me. "Leave me alone." "Just coffee," he mocked. He turned to his friends. "She says just coffee, but you guys better watch your wallets." He leaned over the counter, addressing the barista but shouting for the benefit of the entire room. "Hey, Sarah, you better count that drawer before she leaves, and keep an eye on the tip jar. My sister has a habit of taking things that don't belong to her." The silence in the cafe was absolute. Every laptop typer, every person reading a newspaper, looked up. I felt the heat rise up my neck, burning my cheeks. It was a physical blow. He wasn't just teasing, he was branding me. He was confirming the rumors in real time. "Trent, stop," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Just looking out for the community," he said, winking at his friends. He tossed a $20 bill into the tip jar. "Here, since Isla probably swiped the last one." His friends laughed. A low, ugly sound. I grabbed my cup, the hot paper burning my fingers. and walked out the door. I didn't run, but I wanted to. I walked past the window and saw Trent pantomiming a crying face to his friends. I got into my car and drove until I couldn't see Main Street anymore. I parked in an empty lot behind an abandoned gas station and cried until my throat felt raw. But tears don't pay rent, and that was the new reality I was facing. My savings account, which had been meager to begin with, was bleeding out. I had $312 left to my name. My student loan grace period was ending in 2 months. My father had cut off my gas card. I was buying ramen noodles and rationing gasoline. I did the math on the back of an envelope, and the numbers were terrifying. If I didn't get an income within 14 days, I wouldn't just be humiliated, I would be destitute. I couldn't wait for a career anymore. I needed survival. I stopped looking at LinkedIn. I stopped looking at analyst roles. I started looking at the help wanted signs in windows that I had previously ignored. I drove to the edge of town, where the highway stretches out toward the interstate. That is where the Cedar Ridge Lodge sits. It is not the kind of hotel where my parents would stay. It is a long, flat, 2-story building with peeling beige paint and a parking lot full of semi-trucks. The neon sign out front buzzes with a sound like an angry hornet. And the O in Lodge has been dark for 5 years. But there was a handwritten sign taped to the glass of the front door. Night Audit Housekeeping. Apply inside. No references required. No references required. Those 3 words looked like salvation. I parked my car, checked my face in the rearview mirror to make sure I didn't look like I had been crying, and walked in. The lobby smelled of stale coffee and lemon polish. Behind the front desk sat a woman who looked like she was carved out of granite. She had short, spiky gray hair, a face lined by years of skepticism, and she was reading a paperback novel with a picture of a shirtless pirate on the cover. This was Marla Jensen. I walked up to the desk. "Excuse me, I saw the sign." She didn't look up immediately. She finished the paragraph she was reading, marked the page with a folded gum wrapper, and then slowly raised her eyes. She looked me up and down, taking in my blazer, which was too formal for this place, and my nervous posture. "You here for the housekeeping or the night audit?" she asked. Her voice sounded like gravel in a blender. "Both," I said. "Whatever you have available." She narrowed her eyes. "Fill this out." She slid a clipboard across the laminate counter. I filled it out quickly. Name, address, social security. When I got to the education section, I hesitated. If I wrote down my degree, she might think I would leave in a week. If I didn't, I was lying. I wrote it down. Bachelor of Science. Finance. I handed the clipboard back. Marla scanned it. Her eyebrows shot up when she saw the degree. She looked at the paper, then back at me. "College girl," she said flatly. "High honors. Finance." "Yes, ma'am." "So," she said, leaning back in her chair and crossing her arms, "why are you here? This isn't an internship. You're going to be scrubbing toilets that truckers have destroyed and dealing with drunks at 3 a.m. Why does a girl with a finance degree want to work for $12 an hour in a place like this?" I looked at her. I could have lied. I could have said I was taking a break. I could have said I was researching a book. But looking at Marla's face, I knew she had a built-in detector for nonsense. "Because I can't get hired anywhere else," I said. "Why not?" she challenged. "You kill someone?" "No," I said. My father is Calvin Green, and he has made sure that no one in this county will touch my resume." Marla's expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered. She knew the name. Everyone knew the name. "The construction guy," she said. "The one with the big trucks and the attitude." "That's him." "And he blacklisted his own kid?" "He told everyone I'm a thief," I said. The words tasted like ash. "I'm not, but that doesn't matter anymore. I have $300 left, and I need to eat." Marla stared at me for a long, uncomfortable minute. She was weighing me. She wasn't looking at my credentials. She was looking at my desperation. She was deciding if I was a princess playing poor or someone who was actually ready to work. Finally, she snorted. "I don't care what your daddy says." she said. I care if you show up. I care if the lobby is clean at 6 in the morning. And I care if the cash drawer balances. She reached under the desk and pulled out a polyester polo shirt that was a hideous shade of maroon. She tossed it onto the counter. It starts tonight, 11 to 7. You do the audit, and then you help housekeeping with the overflow laundry until your shift ends. Show up, work, let the town talk. I don't get paid enough to listen to gossip. I took the shirt. It felt like the most valuable thing I had ever held. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet, she warned. You haven't seen the state of room 112. I started that night. The work was grueling in a way I wasn't prepared for. I had worked hard in college, but that was mental fatigue. This was physical. I spent my nights standing at the counter, running the audit reports on a computer system that ran on Windows 95. I checked in late-night guests who didn't look me in the eye and paid in crumpled cash. When the audit was done, I went to the laundry room. It was a hot, steamy concrete box in the basement. I loaded industrial washers with sheets that were stained with things I tried not to identify. I folded hundreds of towels until my fingerprints felt rubbed smooth. I scrubbed bathrooms that smelled of vomit and regret. It was humbling. It was exhausting. And strangely, it was freeing. For 8 hours a night. I wasn't Isla Green. The disappointment. I wasn't the thief. I was just the girl in the maroon shirt who made sure the towels were clean. There was a simplicity to it. The sheets were either dirty or they were clean. There was no politics. There was no gaslighting. But the isolation outside of work deepened. During the day, I slept in short, fitful bursts. When I had to run errands, I wore a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses. Trying to become invisible, occasionally, I would see people from my past. One morning, I was sweeping the sidewalk in front of the lodge entrance. A car pulled up to the red light nearby. I looked up and saw 2 girls I had gone to high school with. They were in the front seat, laughing, holding iced coffees. One of them looked over and saw me. She saw the broom. She saw the maroon uniform. She nudged the driver. They both looked. I braced myself for a wave, or a nod. Instead, they both turned their heads forward, staring rigidly at the traffic light, pretending I didn't exist. I wasn't even worth mocking anymore. I had become part of the scenery, just another piece of debris on the side of the road. I learned to keep my head down. I learned to find a rhythm in the scrubbing. I learned that Marla, for all her roughness, was the only person in town who treated me with dignity. She didn't ask about my family. She brought me a donut sometimes at the end of my shift. She showed me how to unclog the industrial vacuum without breaking a nail. You're good at this, she told me one morning, watching me reconcile the accounts. You're too smart for this, but you're good at it. It's just numbers, I said. It's focus, she corrected. Most people let the noise get to them. You just work. I held on to that. You just work. But the world outside wasn't done with me yet. It was a Tuesday night, about 3 weeks into the job. It was pouring rain, a torrential downpour that hammered against the glass doors of the lobby. The hotel was quiet. I was behind the desk, sorting through a stack of invoices, enjoying the silence. Then I saw headlights sweep across the lobby. A car was pulling in, not a truck, not a beat-up sedan. It was a sleek, black SUV. The headlights were bright, cutting through the rain. As it pulled under the awning of the entrance, I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. I knew those headlights. I knew the custom grille. I knew the license plate before I even saw it. It was my father's car. My heart stopped. I froze, clutching the invoice in my hand. Why were they here? My parents didn't eat at the lodge restaurant. It was beneath them. They didn't visit places like this. The engine cut off. The doors opened. I saw my father step out, holding a large umbrella. Then my mother. Then Trent. They were dressed for dinner. My mother was in a cocktail dress. Trent was in a suit. They weren't here for a room. They were coming inside. I looked around for a place to hide, but there was nowhere to go. I was the night auditor. I was the face at the desk. I was trapped in the open, wearing a polyester uniform, holding a broom, about to face the people who had put me here, and as the automatic doors slid open, letting in the sound of the rain and the scent of expensive cologne, I realized that my exile was about to become a public spectacle. I stood behind the reception desk, my hand frozen on the mouse, as the automatic doors slid open. The damp, cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and expensive cologne. My family walked in. It was not a coincidence. I stopped believing in coincidences the day my third job interview was canceled 10 minutes after my father played golf with the CEO. The Cedar Ridge Lodge restaurant was known for its decent burgers and cheap beer. Not the kind of five-star dining the Greens were accustomed to. They had driven past 3 steakhouses to get here. This was a field trip. Calvin led the way, shaking his umbrella with a sharp snap. He looked around the lobby with a critical sneer, taking in the faded carpet and the flickering fluorescent light. Then, his eyes landed on the front desk. He saw me. I was wearing the baggy maroon uniform, my name tag slightly crooked. I was holding a stack of keycards. For a second, I expected him to look away, to be embarrassed that his daughter was working the night shift at a roadside motel. But then his face lit up. It wasn't a smile of greeting. It was the smile of a general surveying a conquered battlefield. It was pure, unadulterated victory. "Well," he announced, his voice carrying easily across the quiet lobby, "I heard the service here was economical. I didn't realize it was family-operated." Trent pushed past him, laughing. "Check it out. She's actually wearing it. The uniform matches your eyes. Isla, desperation chic." Elaine followed them, keeping her head down, clutching her purse like a shield. She glanced at me for a fleeting second, a look of pained apology, before fixing her eyes on the floor. "We are just here for dinner," Calvin said, walking up to the desk as if he were checking in. He leaned over the counter, invading my space. "Table for 3, somewhere, visible." "The restaurant is through the double doors to your left," I said, my voice mechanical. I refused to look him in the eye. I stared at the knot of his silk tie. "No, welcome to Cedar Ridge?" Trent mocked, leaning on the counter next to our father. "Customer service seems lacking. Dad, maybe you should speak to the manager." "Let's eat," Calvin said, pushing off the counter. "We can watch the show from our table." They walked into the restaurant, which was visible from the front desk through a large glass partition. The restaurant was busy tonight. Truckers, traveling families, locals looking for a cheap meal. My family was seated at a center table. Right in my direct line of sight, the humiliation began almost immediately, every time I had to walk past the glass to check the side entrance or help a guest. Trent would make a show of it. "Hey, waitress!" he shouted once, waving his napkin. "We need more water over here. Oh, wait, she's not qualified for table service, is she?" The diners at the surrounding tables turned to look. They saw the young man in the suit shouting at the hotel clerk. They saw the resemblance. The whisper started. I could see heads leaning together. I could see fingers pointing. "That's the Green family." "Is that the daughter? The one who stole from them? Look at her, working at a dump like this." I kept my head high. I focused on the computer screen. I helped a tired mother check in with her 2 crying toddlers, smiling at her, giving her extra towels without being asked. "You're doing a great job," the woman whispered to me, sensing the tension in the room. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick, but my father wasn't done. When they finished their meal, Calvin stood up. He didn't just leave a tip on the table. He walked over to the glass partition, caught my eye, and held up a $20 bill. He waved it. Then, he dropped it on the floor of the restaurant, right in the main aisle. "Oops," he said loudly. "Someone better pick that up before it disappears. We know how things tend to go missing around here." Laughter rippled through the room. Nervous, uncomfortable laughter, but laughter nonetheless. Trent howled. I looked at my mother. She was still seated, her hands folded in her lap. Her face flickered, a spasm of shame, a tightening of the jaw. For a moment, I thought she might stand up. I thought she might say, "Enough, this is our daughter." But she didn't. She smoothed her napkin. She took a sip of water. She stayed seated, loyal to the performance, loyal to the man who paid for the pearls around her neck. In that moment, standing behind the laminate counter while strangers stared at me with pity and amusement, something inside me broke, but it didn't break into tears. It broke into something harder. It was like a bone that snaps and heals stronger. Calcified and tough, I realized I had been waiting for them to save me. I had been waiting for them to wake up and realize they were hurting me. I had been negotiating for my dignity, hoping that if I suffered enough, if I was humble enough, they would grant me mercy. But they didn't want my humility. They wanted my erasure. I didn't cry. I didn't run to the bathroom. I stared directly at my father through the glass. I didn't blink. I watched him until his smile faltered. Just a fraction. I watched him until he turned away, unsettled by the fact that his victim was still standing. They left 10 minutes later. I didn't say goodbye. Weeks passed. The incident at the restaurant became just another layer of scar tissue. I continued to work. I saved every penny. I ate ramen. I read books from the take one, leave one shelf in the lobby. One Tuesday morning, around 3 a.m., things were dead quiet. I was cleaning out a box of lost and found items that had been sitting in the back office for months, looking for a charger for a guest. I dug through the tangle of wires and old sunglasses at the bottom of the box. I found something familiar. It was my old cell phone. I had lost it, or thought I had lost it, years ago, right around the time Grandma Evelyn died. It must have been packed in a box of college things I had left in the garage, and somehow it had ended up here in my emergency bag I grabbed when I left home. Curiosity, or maybe just boredom, made me plug it in. It took 10 minutes to charge. The screen flickered to life, cracked and dim. It was a time capsule. There were text messages from college friends I hadn't spoken to in years. There were photos of me smiling, looking younger and lighter. And there was a voicemail icon. One new message. I frowned. The date on the message was from 3 years ago, the week after Grandma's funeral. I pressed play. A man's voice, formal and brisk, filled the quiet office. Ms. Green, this is Arthur Sterling from Sterling Associates. I am calling regarding the estate of Evelyn Hart. We have some documents requiring your immediate attention. It is imperative that we speak before the probate period closes. Please return my call at your earliest convenience. I froze. Documents? My father had told me there was no will. He had told me Grandma left everything to the family trust, which he controlled. He said she had died without specific bequests. I grabbed the lodge's landline and dialed the number from the voicemail. Not expecting an answer at 3 a.m, it went to a recorded menu. Sterling Associates, Estate Law. I waited until 9 a.m, my shift over, but I couldn't leave. I sat in the break room, my heart pounding. When the clock struck 9, I called again. Sterling Associates, how may I direct your call? I'm calling about the estate of Evelyn Hart, I said. My name is Isla Green. I found an old voicemail from Mr. Sterling. There was a pause. The receptionist typed something. One moment, please. A minute later, a man came on the line. This is Arthur Sterling. To whom am I speaking? Isla Green, Evelyn Hart's granddaughter. Ms. Green, he said. His voice was cool, bordering on accusatory. I am surprised to hear from you. We closed that file years ago. I never got your message, I said quickly. I lost my phone. What was the call about? It was about the execution of the separate trust Mrs. Hart established for you, he said. I gripped the phone. A separate trust? Yes, but when we attempted to contact you, we were told you were unavailable and had declined any involvement. Told by who? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. Your father, Calvin Green. Mr. Sterling said. He returned our call the day after I left that message. He stated that you were emotionally indisposed, and that you wished to waive your rights to the inheritance in favor of the family pool. He provided a signed affidavit to that effect. The room spun. I never signed anything, I said. I never knew about it. Silence on the other end. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice shaking with a rage so pure it felt like ice. I need to see that affidavit. Because I did not sign it, and I certainly did not waive my rights. If that is true, Ms. Green, he said, his tone shifting from cool to professional alarm, then we have a very serious problem. That trust was substantial. It was designed to provide you with, let me check the notes, Independence Capital. Independence Capital. Grandma hadn't just left me money. She had left me a getaway car, and my father had stolen the keys. He hadn't just sabotaged my job interviews. He hadn't just ruined my reputation. He had actively, legally intercepted the one thing that would have allowed me to escape him years ago. He had forged my consent, or lied about it, to keep me trapped, to keep me poor, to keep me dependent. This wasn't just bad parenting. This was fraud. I need to come see you, I said. I think that would be wise, Mr. Sterling agreed. Can you come to the city? I'll find a way. I hung up. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from clarity. I sat there for a moment, processing the depth of the betrayal. He had stolen my inheritance. He had stolen my time. I needed to know what else he had done. I walked out to the front desk. Marla was there, drinking coffee. You okay, kid? She asked. You look like you saw a ghost. I need to use the computer, I said. Personal business. Go ahead. I logged onto a free credit reporting site. I had never checked my credit before. I assumed it was fine. I had no debt other than my student loans, which were deferred. I typed in my social security number. I answered the security questions. The report loaded. I scrolled down. Outstanding loans. 1. Lender. Cedar Brook Regional Bank. Amount, $50,000. Status, past due. I stared at the screen. I didn't have a loan with Cedar Brook Regional. I banked with a national chain. I clicked on the details. The loan had been taken out 3 years ago, co-signed by Calvin Green, but the primary borrower was me. I hadn't signed that, and then I saw the inquiry log. There was a hard inquiry from last week. Inquiry by Rusk Holdings. Rusk Holdings. That was the company owned by the Rusk family, Calvin's biggest competitors, and the parents of Blaine Rusk. Why were they checking my credit? My father wasn't just stealing from me. He was leveraging me. He had taken out a loan in my name, likely to fund some project he didn't want on his own books. And now he was shopping me around to his rivals? The trap was so much bigger than I thought. It wasn't just a cage, it was a spider web, and I was right in the center of it. But he had made one mistake. He thought I was still the girl who cried when he yelled. He didn't know I was the girl who had just found out she had a lawyer, a stolen fortune, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The morning after I discovered the fraudulent loan and the stolen inheritance, my phone rang. It was not the aggressive, demand-heavy ring I had grown accustomed to. It was mid-morning, a polite hour. The screen displayed Dad. I stared at it. A day ago, I might have let it go to voicemail, terrified of the yelling, but now, armed with the knowledge of his financial crimes, I felt a strange, cold curiosity. I wanted to hear what a man sounds like when he is trying to cover his tracks. I picked up. Hello? Isla, Calvin said. His voice was unrecognizable. The sharp edges were gone, replaced by a warm paternal timbre that sounded like it had been practiced in front of a mirror. I was just thinking about you. It has been raining all week. I worried your car might have trouble starting in this dampness. I leaned against the graffiti-covered wall of the employee break room. My car is fine. Dad, what do you want? I want to help you, he said, sighing as if my stubbornness was a burden he was graciously willing to bear. I have been thinking, this standoff. It is not good for anyone. It is not good for the family, and it is certainly not good for you. Working in that place, he paused. Waiting for me to agree, I stayed silent. Come home, Isla, he continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I am willing to wipe the slate clean. I will stop the calls to employers. I will even clear up the misunderstanding. About the money. I will pay you a stipend. Just a small allowance to get you back on your feet. You can live in the guest cottage. You will have privacy. We can start over. I closed my eyes, letting the absurdity of it wash over me. A stipend. A guest cottage. He wasn't offering me a job. He wasn't offering me an apology. He was offering me a cage with slightly nicer upholstery. He wanted to buy my compliance with an allowance, stripping me of the ability to earn my own living. He wanted me under his roof, where he could monitor my calls, check my mail, and ensure I never spoke to a lawyer like Mr. Sterling again. And what do I have to do? I asked. What is the price, Dad? Just come home, he said soothingly. Be part of the family again. Stop this rebellion. Trust me to take care of your future. Trust me. The words felt like slime. I will think about it, I lied. Don't take too long, he said, and for a split second, the warmth slipped, revealing the steel beneath. Opportunities don't stay open forever. He hung up. 10 minutes later, my mother called. Isla, she breathed, sounding frantic. He told me he spoke to you. He is in such a good mood. Please, please just say yes. Mom, he ruined my career, I said. He stole from me. He is trying to fix it, she cried. Why do you always have to make it so hard? Why do you have to be so difficult? If you just came home, the tension would go away. I could sleep again. Please, Isla, do it for me. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask if I had enough to eat. She just wanted the boat to stop rocking. She wanted me to climb back into the hold and chain myself to the oar so she could enjoy the view from the deck. I can't, Mom, I said. You are selfish, she snapped, her voice breaking. Just like he says. The third strike came via text from Trent. An hour later. Just surrender. You're embarrassing us. People are asking why the green daughter is scrubbing toilets. Dad has a plan. Just get in line. Dad has a plan. That phrase stuck in my mind like a splinter. Calvin Green always had a plan. He didn't offer stipends and truce flags unless he had a strategic endgame. He didn't care about my well-being. He cared about his assets, and for some reason, he needed this specific asset, me, back in storage immediately. I found out why 3 nights later. It was a slow Tuesday. I was doing a perimeter check of the lodge, walking through the back service corridors that ran behind the kitchen and the private meeting rooms. These hallways were narrow, lined with exposed pipes and smelling of old grease. As I passed the ventilation grate for the Pine Room, a small private dining area the lodge rented out for local meetings, I heard a voice. It was a baritone rumble I would know anywhere. I stopped. I didn't breathe. I stepped closer to the vent. The metal slats were dusty, but the sound carried through them as if I were in the room. Timing has to be right. Jim, my father was saying. We can't look desperate. I don't know. Cal, another man replied. I recognized the voice immediately. It was Jim Rusk, the father of Blaine Rusk, the owner of Rusk Holdings, my father's biggest competitor in the county. The county bid opens in 60 days. If we are going to present a united front, we need to lock this down now. My investors are nervous about the liability issues on your side. There are no liabilities, Calvin said smoothly. I have handled the personnel issues. What about the daughter? Jim asked. The one with the history? My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought they would hear it through the wall. Isla is coming home, Calvin said. He sounded completely confident. She is broken. Jim, I have starved her out. A few more months of isolation. And she will agree to anything I put in front of her. She is desperate for stability. And Blaine? Jim asked. Is he on board? Blaine understands the value of this merger, Calvin said. He gets the structural contracts. We get the commercial zoning. It is a monopoly. Jim, we will own the entire corridor from here to the state line. And the girl? She will be a perfect wife for him, Calvin said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. She is educated enough to look good at dinners. but she has been humbled enough to know her place. She won't give him any trouble. I have made sure she has nowhere else to go. She needs this marriage to restore her reputation. I will present it to her as a favor, me fixing the mess she made. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop the scream that was rising in my throat. This was the plan. This was why he wanted me home. He wasn't trying to save me. He was brokering a trade. He was arranging a strategic engagement between me and Blaine Rusk, a man known for his heavy drinking and his wandering hands, to secure a construction bid. I was the collateral. The credit inquiry from Rusk Holdings suddenly made sickening, perfect sense. They weren't checking me for a job. They were vetting me like a piece of livestock before the purchase. They were checking my debt-to-income ratio to ensure I wasn't a financial liability to their son. And the $50,000 loan my father had taken out in my name? That was probably the dowry, or perhaps the buy-in for the joint venture. Leveraged against my credit, so he didn't have to risk his own capital. He had burned my resume, destroyed my reputation, and isolated me from my friends, all to herd me into a corner where my only option would be to marry a man I detested so that my father could build a few more shopping malls. A few more months of isolation and she will agree to anything. I backed away from the vent, my boots silent on the concrete floor. I walked down the hallway, pushed through the heavy fire door, and stepped out into the cool night air behind the hotel. I looked at the stars. I felt the cold wind on my face, and I felt the last tether to my family snap. There was no going back. There was no reconciliation. There was no misunderstanding. My father was a monster who viewed his own children as inventory. My mother was his accomplice. My brother was his heir. I was alone, but being alone meant I had no one left to please. I went back inside. But I didn't go to the front desk. I went to the small business center in the lobby. I sat down at the computer, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I was done playing defense. I was done trying to find a job in Cedar Brook. I was done trying to find a job in this county. I opened the map search. I zoomed out. I looked at the state capital. Then I zoomed out further. I looked at Chicago, New York, Boston. If I stayed here, I was prey. If I left, I was a fugitive, but a free one. I pulled up my resume. I deleted my address. I deleted the local phone number and replaced it with a Google Voice number that had a generic area code. I started applying. I didn't apply for junior roles anymore. I applied for everything: compliance officer, senior risk analyst, forensic auditor. I wrote cover letters that were no longer polite and pleading. They were sharp, hungry, and aggressive. I wrote like a woman who had nothing to lose. I specialize in finding the discrepancies others miss. I understand how systems are manipulated because I have studied the architecture of fraud. I sent 5 applications, then 10, then 20. I applied to firms I had never heard of. I applied to firms that were out of my league. For 3 days. I lived in a state of manic focus. I worked my shift. I slept for 4 hours. And then I applied for jobs until my eyes burned. I checked my email obsessively, deleting the rejections that came in from the automated systems. We regret to inform you. Thank you for your interest. It didn't matter. I just needed one door that my father hadn't locked. One hiring manager who didn't play golf with Calvin Green. On Friday afternoon, my phone pinged. I was in the laundry room, folding a stack of rough, white towels. The air was thick with the smell of bleach. I wiped my hands on my jeans and pulled the phone out of my pocket. It was an email notification. Subject: Interview request. Holloway Meridian Partners. My breath caught. Holloway Meridian. I remembered applying to them in a fit of delusion at 3 a.m. They were a fictional finance giant, the kind of firm that managed endowments and sovereign wealth funds. They were based in the city, 3 hours away. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Green, your application for the senior analyst position has been flagged by our internal review team. Your background, specifically your academic record and your listed skills in forensic accounting, is of interest to us. We do not typically conduct initial interviews at this level. But given the unique nature of your file, We would like to invite you for an in-person assessment. Please arrive at our headquarters at 10 o'clock on Monday morning. You will be meeting with Graham Holloway. I read the last line 3 times. Graham Holloway, the CEO, the founder, the man whose face was on the cover of Forbes last month. Why would the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar firm be interviewing a disgraced entry-level applicant from a roadside motel? It didn't make sense. It felt like a trap. My paranoia flared. Did Calvin know him? Was this another setup? Was I going to walk into that office and find my father waiting there, ready to drag me back to Cedar Brook and Blaine Rusk? I almost deleted the email. It was too risky. It was too good to be true. But then I thought about the conversation in the vent. She will agree to anything. If I didn't go, I was waiting for the inevitable. If I didn't go, I was accepting the cage. This was a long shot. It was a terrifying, impossible long shot. But it was a door. I replied to the email with shaking fingers. I will be there. I put the phone down. I looked at the pile of towels. I walked out of the laundry room and found Marla at the front desk. I need Monday off, I said. Marla looked at me. She saw the set of my jaw. She saw the fire that had replaced the fear in my eyes. You got a bite? She asked. I have an interview, I said. In the city. With who? Holloway Meridian. Marla whistled low. Big leagues. You have a suit? I have one, I said. It's a little worn, but it's clean. She reached into the cash drawer. She pulled out a $20 bill. Her own money. Not the hotel's. She slapped it on the counter. Get it dry cleaned, she ordered. And get a bus ticket. Don't drive that beat-up car of yours. It'll break down and you'll be late. Marla, I can't take your money. Take it, she growled. Consider it an investment. When you're rich, you can buy me a new coffee maker. Now get out of here. You have a war to win. I took the money. I went back to my room. I packed a small bag. My father thought he was playing chess. He thought he had removed all my pieces. He thought the board was clear. He didn't know that his pawn had just decided to become a queen. The email from Holloway Meridian Partners sat in my inbox like an unexploded ordnance. For the first 3 hours after receiving it, I did not celebrate. I did not call anyone. I did not pack. I sat in the darkened business center of the lodge, dissecting the message with the paranoia of a woman who had been hunted for sport for 2 years. It had to be a mistake, or worse, it was a phishing scam designed to steal the last few dollars in my bank account. Or worst of all, it was another one of my father's elaborate cruelties, a fake opportunity set up to lure me into a room where he would be waiting with a contract for my arranged marriage. I became a forensic investigator of my own hope. I checked the sender's domain. It matched the official firm website perfectly. I cross-referenced the physical address listed in the signature. It was a skyscraper in the financial district of the state capital, a building I knew by reputation as the Citadel. I looked up the executive assistant who had copied the email, a woman named Sarah Jenkins. Her LinkedIn profile was real, active, and connected to hundreds of high-profile finance professionals. I even called the firm's main switchboard at 6 in the evening, just to hear the automated greeting. Thank you for calling Holloway Meridian. It was real. The interview was real. And that meant I had exactly 48 hours to transform from a night shift hotel clerk back into a high-powered finance analyst. The logistics were a nightmare. My bank account balance was hovering around double digits. I calculated the cost of a bus ticket to the city, the subway fare, and a cheap meal. I was short by about $40. I looked at my wrist. I was wearing a thin silver bracelet, a 16th birthday present from an aunt who had moved to Europe years ago. It was the only piece of jewelry I hadn't sold or left behind at my parents' house. It wasn't worth much, but it was worth a bus ticket. I drove to a pawn shop on the edge of town, the kind with bars on the windows and a sign that said, "We buy gold" in fading yellow letters. The man behind the counter weighed the silver without looking at me. $30. He grunted. I took it. I didn't haggle. I didn't have the time or the dignity for it. I went back to the lodge and found Marla in the back office. She was working on the schedule, frowning at a spreadsheet. When she saw me, she put her pen down. I need a favor, I said, the words sticking in my throat. I need to switch shifts. I need Monday off. And I need to borrow the steamer. Marla looked at me. She looked at the desperation vibrating off me like heat. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a wad of cash, and peeled off two $20 bills. She didn't hand them to me. She slapped them onto the desk. You are not just switching shifts, she said, her voice rough. You are taking the day. And you are not taking the steamer. You are taking the cash. Go to the dry cleaner on 4th Street. Tell them Marla sent you. They will get that suit looking like new by Monday morning. I can't take your money. Marla, I said, feeling the sting of tears I refused to shed. It is an advance. She lied. You can pay me back when you are running that place. Now go. Get your life back. I walked out of her office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. I felt backed. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. I spent hours reciting answers to interview questions in the mirror of the employee bathroom. I scrubbed my fingernails until they were raw. I ironed my one good white blouse 3 times, terrified of a wrinkle that might signal my poverty. On Monday morning, I woke up at 4. I dressed in the dark. The suit fit a little looser than it used to. Stress had eaten away 10 pounds. But with the blazer buttoned, I looked professional. I looked like Isla Green, the honors graduate. I didn't look like Isla, the maid. I caught the 6 o'clock bus to the city. It was a Greyhound, smelling of diesel fumes and stale fast food. I sat in the back, clutching my portfolio case against my chest, as the bus rumbled out of Cedar Brook, leaving the manicured lawns and the suffocating silence of my hometown behind. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I was doing it. I was escaping. In a moment of weakness, a moment of pure, unadulterated hope. I pulled out my phone. I snapped a photo of the bus station sign as we pulled away. It was blurry. It didn't show my face. It didn't show the destination. I posted it to my dormant social media account, the one I hadn't used since the scandal began. I typed 2 words. New beginnings. I just wanted to mark the moment. I wanted to tell the universe that I was still here, that I was still fighting. I didn't realize I was sending a flare to the enemy. The bus ride took 3 hours. I watched the landscape change from cornfields to suburbs to the gray rising spine of the city skyline when I stepped off the bus at the terminal. The noise of the city hit me like a physical wave. Sirens, horns, thousands of people moving with purpose. I walked the 10 blocks to the financial district. I wanted to save the subway fare, and I needed to burn off the nervous energy coursing through my veins. I reached the block of the Holloway Meridian building at 9:45. It was a monolith of glass and steel, reflecting the clouds. It looked impenetrable. It looked expensive. I took a deep breath, straightened my blazer, and checked my reflection in a shop window. And then my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Dad. My stomach dropped through the floor. I ignored it. It rang again immediately. I stopped walking. I was 50 feet from the revolving doors of the building. If I didn't answer, he would keep calling. If he was calling now, minutes before my interview, he knew. I answered. Hello? I said, my voice tight. I know where you are. Isla, Calvin said. There was no preamble, no fake warmth this time. His voice was cold, flat, and terrifyingly close. I saw the picture. He said, You think you are clever? New beginnings? A bus station? It took Trent 5 minutes to figure out the route, and it took me 1 phone call to figure out where a girl with a finance degree and no money would be heading in the city. I am just visiting a friend. I lied, my eyes darting around the street, irrationally expecting him to jump out of a black SUV. Don't lie to me, he snapped. You are at the Citadel. You are trying to get a meeting with Holloway. You are wasting your time. I have an interview. Dad, I said, finding a shred of courage. You can't stop me. Isla, listen to me, he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. I know Graham Holloway. We sat on the regional development board together 5 years ago. I have his direct line. In fact, I have my assistant dialing it right now on the other line. I froze. The city noise faded into a dull roar. "If you walk into that building," he continued, "I will call him. I will tell him everything. I will tell him about the theft. I will tell him about the instability. I will tell him you are a liability who is estranged from her family for legal reasons. Do you think he will hire you after that? Do you think he wants the drama? He won't believe you," I whispered, but I didn't believe it myself. "He is a businessman." "Isla," Calvin said, "he avoids risk, and you are a walking risk. Turn around. Get back on the bus. Come home. If you turn around now, I won't make the call. I will let you save your dignity." My phone vibrated against my ear. A text from Trent. Dad already handled it. He called the VP of HR 10 minutes ago. "Enjoy the ride home. Thief." I stood there on the sidewalk, the wind whipping my hair across my face. I looked at the revolving doors. They felt like a mouth waiting to chew me up and spit me out. He had already called. Of course he had. He didn't wait. He struck first. If I walked in there, I wasn't walking into an interview. I was walking into an ambush. I would hand my name to the receptionist. She would look at a screen. Her face would harden, and she would ask me to leave. Or worse, Graham Holloway would see me just to lecture me, just to do a favor for his old friend Calvin Green. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to run. I wanted to go back to the bus station, curl up on a plastic seat, and disappear. Respect is taught by consequences. I looked at the building again. If I turned around, he won't just win. He would own me. I would be walking back to Cedar Brook to marry Blaine Rusk and live in a guest cottage. If I walked in, I would be humiliated. I would be rejected. But I would be rejected on my own terms. I would force them to look me in the eye and do it. I took a breath that rattled in my chest. "Go to hell." "Dad," I said. I hung up. I turned the phone off. I walked toward the doors. My legs felt like lead. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thief, thief, thief. The word echoed in my head with every step. I pushed through the revolving door and stepped into the lobby. It was silent and cool. The floors were marble. The ceiling was 3 stories high. A security desk that looked like the command center of a spaceship blocked the path to the elevators. I walked up to the receptionist. She was a young woman with perfect hair and a headset. She looked busy. She looked like the gatekeeper of a world I was not allowed to enter. "Hi," I said, my voice shaking slightly. I have an appointment." "Name?" she asked without looking up. "Isla Green." I said, "I am here to see—" I braced myself. I braced myself for the pause, for the frown, for the, "Oh, Ms. Green, I am afraid your appointment has been cancelled. I am here to see Graham Holloway." I finished. The receptionist stopped typing. She looked up. Her expression wasn't one of disdain. It wasn't one of pity. It was recognition. "Ms. Green," she said. She stood up. She actually stood up. "We have been expecting you." She didn't ask for my ID. She didn't call up to verify. She reached under the desk and pulled out a badge. It was already printed. It didn't have a visitor sticker. It was a hard plastic badge with a magnetic strip. "Please take the private elevator to the penthouse suite," she said, gesturing to a set of gold doors set apart from the main bank of elevators. "Mr. Holloway is clearing his schedule for you." I stared at the badge in my hand. It felt heavy, but I started to say, "Did anyone call? Did my father?" She smiled professionally. "Ms. Green, Mr. Holloway does not take unscheduled calls when he is expecting a priority guest. You can go right up." I walked to the gold doors in a daze. I swiped the badge. The doors slid open instantly. There were no other buttons inside. Just one. PH. I pressed it. The elevator began to rise. Smooth and silent. My ears popped. I watched the numbers climb. 20, 30, 40, 50. I was rising above the noise of the street. I was rising above the bus station. I was rising above the reach of Calvin Green's voice. The elevator slowed. A soft chime sounded. The doors slid open. I stepped out onto a carpet so thick it felt like walking on moss. The floor was quiet. There were no cubicles here, no ringing phones. Just floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. walls lined with modern art, and a heavy silence that smelled of old money and power. A woman stood behind a sleek desk in the center of the room. She was older, elegant, with silver glasses perched on her nose. This must be the executive assistant. She looked at me. She looked at my worn suit, my wind-blown hair, the cheap portfolio I was clutching like a life preserver. "Ms. Green," she said softly. "Yes," I said. "I am sorry if I am a little early. You are right on time," she interrupted. She walked around the desk. She didn't offer me coffee. She didn't ask me to sit and wait. She walked toward a massive set of double mahogany doors at the end of the hall. She placed her hand on the handle, then turned back to look at me. Her eyes were kind, but they held a strange intensity, a weight I couldn't understand. "Mr. Holloway is eager to meet you," she said. She pushed the door open, and then she added the line that made the blood drain from my face and pool in my feet. "He has been waiting for you for a long time." "Isla." She didn't say he has been waiting for 10 minutes. She said a long time. I walked into the office. The door clicked shut behind me. And as I looked across the expanse of the room toward the man standing by the window, I realized that I hadn't just walked into a job interview. I had walked into the answer to a question I didn't know I had asked. The silence in Graham Holloway's office was not empty. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that usually costs a lot of money to manufacture, the complete absence of traffic, sirens, and the frantic energy of the trading floor 40 stories below. The room smelled of leather and cedar and something sharp, like ink. I stood just inside the heavy mahogany doors, clutching my cheap portfolio, feeling like an imposter who had wandered onto a movie set. Graham Holloway was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the skyline. He was not the terrifying shark I had expected. He was a man in his late 50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my parents' car, but his posture was relaxed. When he turned to face me, his expression was unreadable. He didn't look at my scuffed shoes. He didn't look at the frayed hem of my blazer. He looked directly at my face, searching for something. "You look like her," he said. It was not the greeting I had prepared for. I had rehearsed answers about my GPA, my work ethic, and my resilience. I had prepared a defense against the accusations I knew my father had already planted. "Mr. Holloway," I started, my voice sounding thin in the cavernous room. "I know my father called you. I know what he said. I just want to say that the allegations of theft are—" He held up a hand. It was a gentle gesture, not a command to silence me, but a request to pause. "Isla," he said, using my first name with a familiarity that threw me off balance. "I did not bring you here to discuss your father, and I certainly did not bring you here to interview for a junior analyst position." My stomach tightened. "Then why am I here? If this is about the loan, or if you are doing a favor for Calvin—" "I have never done a favor for Calvin Green in my life," Graham said, a hard edge entering his voice for a brief second before it vanished. "And I have no intention of starting now." He walked over to a panel on the wall. Disguised as a piece of abstract art, he pressed a sequence of hidden buttons, and the panel slid back to reveal a wall safe. "I am a man of my word," Graham said, his back to me as he spun the dial. "But this is the longest I have ever had to wait to fulfill a promise. She told me you would come. She said it might take time. She said they would try to break you first, but she was absolutely certain you would walk through that door eventually." The safe clicked open. He reached inside and pulled out a single object. It was a thick, manila envelope. It wasn't new. The edges were soft and worn, the paper yellowed with age. It looked like it had been sitting in the dark for a very long time. Graham turned and walked toward me. He held the envelope out with both hands, as if he were presenting a flag to a grieving widow. "This belongs to you," he said. I took it. My hands were trembling, written on the front. In blue ink that had faded slightly but was still unmistakable, was my name. Isla. I stopped breathing. I knew that handwriting. I knew the sharp loop of the L and the aggressive cross of the A. It was the handwriting that had signed my birthday cards, labeled the jars of jam in the pantry, and corrected my homework when my mother was too busy hosting dinners. "Grandma Evelyn," I whispered. "Look at the date," Gram said softly. I looked at the corner of the envelope. October 14th, 2011. 15 years ago, I was 12 years old. "There is an instruction on the back," Gram added. I turned the envelope over. Sealed with red wax, Grandma always loved the theatrics of wax, was a note taped to the flap, to be opened only when Isla Green arrives here seeking work. "I don't understand," I said, looking up at Gram. My vision was starting to blur. "She died 4 years ago. How did you know her?" "Evelyn Hart was the first person to invest in Holloway Meridian," Gram said. 30 years ago, when I was just a kid with a laptop and a crazy idea about algorithmic trading, every bank in the city laughed at me. Your father laughed at me. He told me I was gambling. Evelyn listened to my pitch. She looked me in the eye, smoked one of those terrible cigarettes, and wrote me a check for $50,000. She was my first partner." He gestured to the chair in front of his desk. "Sit down. Isla, read it." I sat. My legs wouldn't have held me up much longer anyway. I broke the wax seal. The sound of the tearing paper was loud in the quiet room. Inside, there were 3 things: a handwritten letter on heavy stationery, a legal document with a gold seal, and a small black notebook. I picked up the letter first. "My dearest Isla, if you are reading this, 2 things have happened. First, I am gone. Second, your father has finally cornered you. I knew this day would come. I watched him at the dinner table. I saw how he looked at you, not as a daughter, but as a resource he couldn't quite control. I saw how he looked at Trent, as a mirror he adored, and I saw your mother, God help her, deciding that peace was more important than protection. I knew that when you became a woman, Calvin would try to clip your wings. He cannot stand things that grow taller than him. He will try to make you dependent. He will try to take your money, your confidence, and your voice. He will tell you that you are nothing without him. I am writing this to tell you that he is wrong. You are not the spare. Isla, you are the strong one. And the strong ones always need a little war chest. Years ago, I made an investment. I did not put it in the family trust because Calvin controls that, and he would have used it to buy another boat or cover up Trent's mistakes. I put this investment in a separate, irrevocable blind trust. In your name, I made Graham the trustee with strict instructions. You were not to know about it until you came to him on your own. You had to prove you were willing to leave Cedar Brook before you could have the means to stay gone. If you are sitting in Graham's office, you have passed the test. You walk through the door. Do not cry for me. Just promise me one thing. Do not let them buy you back. You are free now. Love, Grandma. A tear splashed onto the paper, blurring the ink of her signature. I wiped it away frantically. "The document," Graham said gently. I picked up the legal paper with the gold seal. It was a stock certificate. Certificate of ownership. Holloway Meridian Partners. Class A preferred shares. I scanned the numbers. My brain, trained in finance, did the math automatically, but it refused to accept the result. This says I own 5%, I stammered. 10%, Graham corrected. The stock split 2 years ago. The trust managed the reinvestment. 10% of Holloway Meridian? I asked, my voice rising to a squeak. But that's... The firm is currently valued at just over $2 billion, Graham said matter-of-factly. Your stake, held in the Hart Green Trust, is valued at roughly $200 million, and there are accumulated dividends sitting in an escrow account that total another $14 million. My stomach dropped. $200 million. An hour ago. I had pawned a bracelet for $30 to buy a bus ticket. An hour ago. I was worried about paying Marla back for the dry cleaning. This is a mistake, I said. This can't be real. It is very real, Graham said. You are not an applicant, Isla. You are a founding shareholder. Technically, you are my boss. Or at least, my partner. He pointed to the third item, the black notebook. And she left you that, he said. She called it the insurance policy. I opened the notebook. It was a ledger, but it wasn't a ledger of numbers. It was a ledger of secrets. Grandma Evelyn had been observant. She had written down dates, times, and details of conversations she had overheard or witnessed involving my father. August 12, 1998. Calvin paid off the zoning inspector for the riverfront project, $10,000 cash. I saw the envelope. March 4th, 2002. Calvin threatened the subcontractor. Mr. Henderson told him he would ruin his reputation if he reported the safety violation. Henderson went bankrupt 6 months later. June 20th, 2005. Calvin forging Elaine's signature on the second mortgage documents. It went on for pages. It was a chronicle of bullying, bribery, and coercion. It was proof that the respectable Calvin Green was a fraud built on intimidation. I closed the notebook. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't just relief. It was the feeling of armor snapping into place. My father had called me a thief. He had projected his own sins onto me. He was the one who stole. He stole safety. He stole money. He stole truth. And Grandma had seen it all. He called me this morning, Graham said. Breaking the silence, he walked over to his desk and leaned against it, crossing his ankles. Your father, he was quite insistent. What did he say? I asked. Graham smiled, but it was a cold, sharp smile. He told me that you were unstable. He told me that you had a history of financial impropriety. He warned me that hiring you would be a liability to the firm. Graham laughed, a short, dry sound. The irony was delicious. Isla. He was trying to convince me to reject a woman who owns 10% of my building. He was trying to sabotage a shareholder. If I had listened to him, if I had turned you away, I would have been violating my fiduciary duty to you. He unknowingly asked me to break the law to help him abuse his daughter. Did you tell him? I asked. No, Graham said. I told him I would take his advice under advisement. I wanted you to be the one to decide how we handle him. I looked down at the letter in my lap. You are free now. I started to cry. It wasn't a polite, silent cry. It was a heaving, ugly sob that came from the bottom of my stomach. I bent forward, burying my face in my hands. I cried for the 2 years of hell. I cried for the ramen noodles and the maroon uniform. I cried for the girl who thought she was worthless because her father said so. I cried because I realized I hadn't been fighting alone. Grandma Evelyn had been there the whole time, waiting in this safe, holding the door open until I was strong enough to walk through it. Graham didn't say anything. He didn't offer a tissue or tell me to calm down. He let me weep. He gave me the dignity of my grief. When I finally sat up, wiping my face with the back of my hand, I felt lighter. I felt dangerous. So, Graham said, his voice businesslike again, we have a situation. You are a major stakeholder in this firm. You have liquid assets that make you one of the wealthiest women in the state. And you have a father who believes you are currently destitute and begging for a job. He wants me to come home, I said, my voice steady now. He is trying to marry me off to Blaine Rusk to secure a construction bid. Graham's eyes narrowed. That sounds like Calvin, always trading people like commodities. He walked behind his desk and picked up a heavy cardstock invitation. He slid it across the mahogany surface toward me. Next Saturday, Graham said. The Founders' Charity Gala. It is the biggest event of the season. Everyone who is anyone in the state business community attends. Legislators, investors, developers. I looked at the invitation, celebrating integrity in business. Calvin will be there, Graham said. He bought a platinum table. He is desperate to secure the Rusk partnership, and he needs to look successful to do it. He thinks you are going to be in Cedar Brook, broken and ready to surrender. He leaned forward. I propose we make a correction, Graham said. Not a press release, a visual correction. You attend the gala, not as my employee, as my partner, as the co-host. I imagined it, walking into that ballroom, my father sitting there, holding court, telling his lies, and then me, not in a maroon polo, not in a frayed suit, but standing next to Graham Holloway, holding the power he thought he had stripped from me. It would be nuclear. It would destroy his narrative in front of the very people he tried to impress. But then I looked at the ledger. I looked at the history of a man who used humiliation as a weapon. "I will do it," I said. "Good," Graham said, reaching for his phone. "I will call the stylists." "But I have conditions," I said. Graham paused. He looked at me with genuine curiosity. "Name them." "No scenes," I said. "I don't want to scream at him. I don't want to throw wine in his face. I don't want to be him. Graham, if we do this, we do it with absolute precision. We use facts. We use the truth. I want him to expose himself. I don't want to destroy him for sport. I want to dismantle him for the record." Graham smiled. And this time, it reached his eyes. It was a smile of genuine respect. "Evelyn was right about you," he said. "You aren't just smart. You are formidable. And one more thing," I said, tapping the ledger. "We have legal verify everything in this book. If we are going to drop a bomb, I want to make sure it doesn't blow up in our faces. I want his destruction to be airtight." "Agreed," Graham said. "Welcome to the firm. Ms. Green." He held out his hand. I stood up and shook it. My grip was firm. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I walked back to the window and looked out at the city. It didn't look like a scary labyrinth anymore. It looked like a kingdom. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for a place to hide. I was looking for a dress. Revenge is often described as a dish best served cold, implying it should be calculated, unfeeling, and delayed. But as I stood in the dressing room of the penthouse suite, looking at myself in the floor-to-length mirror, I realized that I did not want revenge. Revenge is about inflicting pain to balance a scorecard. I wanted something far more permanent. I wanted correction. I was not dressed for a ball. There were no sequins, no plunging necklines, no Cinderella tulle meant to catch the eye of a prince. I was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo suit with sharp, tailored lines that made me look like exactly what I was, a decision maker. My hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant knot. The only jewelry I wore was a simple gold pin on my lapel, the insignia of Holloway Meridian Partners, inside the breast pocket of my blazer. Resting against my ribs like a second heartbeat was Grandma Evelyn's letter. It was my armor. "Are you ready?" Graham asked from the doorway. He looked regal in his tuxedo, but his eyes were alert, watching me for any sign of hesitation. "I am ready," I said. My voice did not shake. The girl who had scrubbed toilets at the Cedar Ridge Lodge was gone. In her place stood the woman who had survived the fire her father had set. We took the private elevator down to the grand ballroom. The Founders' Charity Gala was already in full swing. The air was thick with the hum of expensive conversation, the clinking of crystal, and the subtle maneuvering of power. As we walked toward the double doors, I felt a calm settle over me. It was the calm of the hurricane's eye. We entered the room. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. Waiters moved like ghosts with trays of champagne. In the center of the room, holding court near the ice sculpture, was my family. Calvin Green was in his element. He was laughing loudly, one hand resting possessively on the shoulder of Jim Rusk, the man whose son I was supposed to marry. My father looked flush with victory. He believed he had won. He believed I was currently crying in a guest cottage or shivering in a motel room, broken and ready to submit. My mother, Elaine, stood beside him, her smile fixed and brittle. Trent was there too, checking his reflection in a window, looking bored. They didn't see me at first. I was a shadow in the periphery, standing next to the most powerful man in the room. Graham walked to the stage. The room quieted instantly. The respect he commanded was genuine, unlike the fear my father relied on. "Good evening," Graham said into the microphone. His voice was warm but authoritative. "Tonight is about legacy. It is about the foundations we build, not just in concrete and steel, but in character. We talk a lot about success in this room, but success without integrity is just a house built on sand. He paused. His eyes scanned the crowd and landed briefly on Calvin. My father puffed out his chest, assuming the speech was about men like him. True leadership, Graham continued, is having the courage to stand alone when the world tells you to sit down. It is about enduring silence when you should be screaming. Tonight, I have the distinct privilege of introducing you to the future of Holloway Meridian. The crowd murmured. They expected a merger announcement. They expected a new vice president from New York. Please welcome our newest senior analyst, Graham said, his voice rising. And, through a legacy trust established 15 years ago, a founding shareholder who holds a 10% equity stake in this firm, Ms. Isla Green. The name hung in the air for a split second before the applause started. It was polite applause at first, then confusion ripples through the room. Isla Green? Calvin's daughter? The one who... I walked out from the shadows. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage. The spotlight hit me. I didn't squint. I looked out at the sea of faces, and then I looked directly at table 1. The color drained from Calvin Green's face so fast, he looked like he had been embalmed. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Trent dropped his drink. The glass shattered on the parquet floor, loud and sharp. Elaine put a hand to her throat. I stood next to Graham. I didn't smile. I stood with my hands clasped loosely in front of me, radiating absolute, terrifying competence. The whispers in the room turned into a roar of shock, and then Calvin snapped. He didn't think. He didn't calculate. He saw his narrative, the careful story of the thief, the failure, the unstable daughter, collapsing in real time, and he panicked. He stormed toward the stage. His face was a mask of purple rage. "This is a joke," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Graham, what are you doing? This girl is a thief." The room went deathly silent. Security guards stepped forward, but Graham held up a hand to stop them. He wanted the room to see this. Calvin reached the edge of the stage, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She is a liar. She stole thousands of dollars from her own family. She is mentally unstable. I have reports. I have witnesses. Get her off that stage before she embarrasses this firm." He looked around the room, desperate for validation. "She is a criminal. I have been trying to get her help for years." I looked down at him. He looked so small. Graham stepped to the microphone. He didn't shout. He spoke with the clinical detachment of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. "Calvin," Graham said, "we have audited the records." "What records?" Calvin spat. "She lies." "The credit card statements from 4 years ago," Graham said. "The amount in question was $2,415. The items purchased were university textbooks, a refurbished laptop, and exam fees. We also have copies of the checks Isla sent you, repaying the principal plus 6% interest. The debt was settled years ago." "That's not," Calvin started. "Furthermore," Graham interrupted, his voice hardening, "we have conducted a forensic review of your communication with employers in this county. We have affidavits from 3 hiring managers, including Mr. Lewis at the logistics firm, stating that you personally called them to slander a candidate with false accusations of theft to prevent her from securing employment." The crowd gasped. This wasn't just family drama. This was tortious interference. This was illegal. "You are lying," Calvin screamed, sweat pouring down his face. "She is my daughter. I can say what I want." "Actually, you can't," a new voice said. A man in a gray suit stepped out from the wings of the stage. It was Mr. Sterling, the estate attorney. He was holding a leather folder. He walked down the stairs and handed the folder to Calvin. "Mr. Green," Sterling said loud enough for the front tables to hear, "I am serving you with notice. 15 years ago, Evelyn Hart filed a compliance package with my firm. It contains a ledger of notarized witness statements regarding your business practices, bribery of zoning officials, intimidation of subcontractors, and falsification of safety records." Calvin froze. He looked at the folder as if it were radioactive. "Mrs. Hart's instructions were specific, Sterling continued. These documents were to remain sealed unless you attempted to publicly slander or financially sabotage her granddaughter, Isla Green, by taking out a fraudulent loan in her name, which we have also documented, and by your public outburst tonight, you have triggered the release of these files to the State Attorney General. It was the trapdoor. Grandma Evelyn hadn't just given me money. She had given me a kill switch. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Every business partner, every investor, every politician in the room was looking at Calvin Green. They were mentally deleting his number from their phones. They were witnessing a social and professional execution. Calvin looked at the folder, then at me. His eyes were wild. He realized he had lost the narrative. He realized he had lost the Rusk deal. He realized he might lose his freedom, and in his panic, he told the truth. "I did it for her," he screamed, his voice raw and desperate. "I had to break her. She wouldn't listen. She thought she was better than us. I had to teach her respect. A father has to control his house." He shouted it. I had to break her. He confessed to the sabotage. He confessed to the abuse. He confessed that the theft was a lie and the motivation was pure. Unadulterated control. The horror in the room was palpable. Jim Rusk stepped back from the table, putting distance between himself and the man who had just admitted to destroying his own child for sport. Graham stepped back, giving me the microphone. I stepped forward. I didn't look at the audience. I looked only at my father. "Respect," I said, my voice clear and amplified, filling every corner of the ballroom, "is earned, Dad. It is not extorted." I looked at my mother. She was weeping now, her face buried in her hands, finally seeing the monster she had protected for 30 years. I looked at Trent, who was staring at the floor, realizing his shield was gone. "You thought you could starve me into submission," I said. "You thought that if you took away my job, my reputation, and my friends, I would crawl back to you. You thought you could trade me to a rival company like a bag of cement." I paused. "But you forgot one thing. You forgot that Grandma Evelyn saw you. She saw exactly who you were, and she made sure that I would have a choice." I took a breath. I felt the weight of the last 2 years lift off my shoulders. The shame was gone. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. I handed it back to him. "I am not a thief," I said. "I am a shareholder. I am a survivor. And I am done negotiating for my own humanity." I leaned closer to the mic for the final verdict. "A family isn't a leash, Calvin, and I am not your dog." I signaled to security. "Please remove this guest," I said. "He is disturbing the event." 2 large security guards stepped forward. Calvin tried to protest, but the fight had gone out of him. He looked at the room, at the faces of the people he had tried to impress, and saw only disgust. He slumped. He let them lead him away. A small, defeated man in an expensive suit. The aftermath was not a fairy tale. It was a demolition. In the days that followed, the Green Ridge Structural Group imploded. The contracts that were pending were canceled. The Rusk deal evaporated within an hour of the gala. The State Attorney General opened an investigation based on Grandma's ledger, and while Calvin hired expensive lawyers to fight it, his reputation was dead. He was radioactive. Trent tried to call me once, asking for a loan. I blocked the number. He had to sell his sports car. He had to get a real job. Last I heard, he was working sales at a car dealership in the next county, learning that mediocrity is not rewarded in the real world. Elaine moved into a condo. We haven't spoken much, but she sent me a letter. It was short. "I'm sorry I was too weak to stop him. It wasn't enough to fix the past, but it was a start." As for me, I didn't move into the penthouse. I rented a beautiful, light-filled apartment in the city with high ceilings and a view of the park. I started my job at Holloway Meridian, not as a figurehead, but as an analyst. I work hard. I earn my place every single day. But the first thing I did when the dust settled was drive back to Cedar Brook one last time. I went to the cemetery on the hill. I found the simple granite marker, Evelyn Hart, beloved mother and grandmother. I knelt in the grass. I didn't bring flowers. I brought a copy of the gala program. I placed it against the stone. You were right, I whispered to the wind. You placed the door, but I walked through it. I sat there for a long time, listening to the birds, feeling the sun on my face. I thought about the girl who had folded towels in a basement laundry room, terrified of her own shadow. She felt like a stranger now. I stood up, brushed the grass from my knees, and walked back to my car. I drove out of Cedar Brook without looking in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to look back. My life was in front of me, vast and terrifying and beautiful. I had options. I had dignity. And for the first time in my life, I was truly, completely free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long road from that hotel lobby to where I am now, but I wouldn't change the ending for anything. I would love to know where you are tuning in from right now. Drop a comment below with your city and what time it is there. Let's see how far this story has traveled. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the channel Monica Revenge Stories. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to help this story get recommended to more people who might need to hear that there is always a way out. Stay strong, and remember, you can build your own door.